Well, hello and welcome to the DaveCast for September 10th as we continue in our Exodus series. Just a quick review to get us up to speed. Following the whole incident with the golden calf, God's very angry with the Israelites and he's instructed them to leave Mount Sinai and to continue on their journey to Canaan land, the flowing land with milk and honey as it's been described. But there is distressing news because God has said, I'm not going with you. I'm so mad about how you broke the covenant with the whole golden calf thing that I'm afraid I might destroy you if I come and go along with you. So instead, God is going to send an angel to lead them, which might have been something like the pillar of cloud like they already had. We don't know. But again, Moses intercedes for the people and he goes out to meet with God in the tent of meeting, which is pitched outside the camp. And that's kind of where we left off on Tuesday. And there he makes three requests of God. And so let's get into the text and see what happens. His first request we find in Exodus 33, 12 and 13. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now, therefore, if I have found favor in your sight, please show me now your ways, that I may know you in order to find favor in your sight. Consider, too, this nation is your people." And so Moses realizes that God has appointed him as leader over Israel. And he then realizes that he can't do this without help. So he says, you have not let me know whom you're going to send with me. Who's going to help Moses? An angel? Well, that'd be pretty cool, but that's not what Moses wants. That's not good enough for Moses. Moses says he wants something in particular from God. Just as God knows Moses and calls him a friend, so Moses wants to know God. And I don't think Moses is talking about knowing God in a theoretical way. He's talking about knowing God in a personal way. He wants to know what God intends for Israel, how he intends to act, how he will provide for his people. Moses wants to know God, not just to know about him, but to know God. And so that's the first request. And then Moses makes a second request. He says, if your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Is it not in your going with us so that we are distinct, I and your people, from every other people on the face of the earth? Now, this is pretty interesting. Remember, God has already told Moses that he will give Israel what they want. In the beginning of the chapter, I'll go back and review that. He says, I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now, I know I already read that on Tuesday, but I just like reading that list. It's very fun. You should try it sometime. Okay, so continuing on. He's going to lead them up to a land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go among you, lest I consume you on the way, for you are a stiff-necked people. Okay, so they can have everything they want, God says, except for his presence with them. I wonder what would happen if God said to us that we could have everything that we wanted minus his presence. If all of our dreams could come true, but without him. Think about that. If you could have heaven with no sickness and with all the friends you ever had on earth and all the things that you've enjoyed here, all the natural beauties that you ever saw and everything else that goes with it, could you be satisfied with heaven if God were not there? That's something for us to think about. But for Moses, the answer is absolutely not. Moses doesn't want to go anywhere that God's not going. Moses shows us that what we really need isn't all of our problems to be solved or even for all of our dreams to come true, even though that'd be really nice. What we really need most of all is for God's presence with us. It'd be better to live in a desert with no home permanently than to go to the promised land without God. That's what Moses is saying. The reason? Well, the very thing that set Israel apart from everyone else. It wasn't their land or their wealth or their culture or anything else, because really they had none of these. The only thing that set them apart was God's presence with them. And the same applies to us. We need to know God. We need his presence. And see the progression here, by the way. First, Moses wants to know God. Second, Moses wants God to move in with him, presence. And then we get to this third thing that he requests. Moses says, Exodus 33:18, please show me your glory, which is an audacious request. But what does that mean? What does God's glory mean? I think that defining the glory of God is a bit impossible. It's more like trying to define the word beauty than, say, a word like basketball. If someone says they've never heard of basketball, they don't know what a basketball is. And so they say, tell me about a basketball. Well, that wouldn't be so hard for us to do, right? I mean, you kind of probably take your hands and say, well, it's a round thing. It's made out of leather and rubber. It's about yay big, 9 or 10 inches in diameter. And you blow it up, you inflate it, so it's pretty hard. And it's usually orange, but it can be other colors, like in the Olympics. And then you bounce it like this, and you can throw it to people, and you can run when you're bouncing it. It's called dribbling. And then there's this hoop at the end of the courts, and you try to throw the ball through the hoop. Now, I think they would get a pretty good idea what a basketball was, and they'd be able to determine a basketball from, say, a soccer ball or a football. Well, you can't do that with the word beauty. I mean, there's some words in our vocabulary that we can communicate with, not because we can say them, but because we see them. We can point and say, there's beauty. There's beauty. There's beauty. That's it. I see it there. And so after a while, we kind of get a common sense of what beauty is, even though it's hard to put beauty into words. It's kind of a difficult thing. And it's even so much more with God's glory. I mean, it's very too difficult to define it. I mean, we read it all throughout the Scriptures. I mean, the Psalms say, the heavens are telling the glory of God. The Gospel of John tells us that in Jesus we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. In Revelation, when heaven and earth meet and the New Jerusalem is there, it says that the glory of God serves as the light for the city. And so back on Tuesday, we talked about anthropomorphism and our wanting to attribute human characteristics to God, to make God into our image, like this one I'll put up on the screen. But, that's making God into our image, and we know that's not what God really looks like. And yet the Scripture tells us we are made in God's image. And so what does that mean? I don't really know fully, but I think at least it means in part that we have a soul that is eternal, that will live on past these bodies that we are dwelling in here on earth, that we were made for eternity. And so connecting with that and continuing into the text, we read that God agrees, at least in part, to do this thing to show Moses his glory. And then the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. And then the Lord said, there is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. So you've heard the hymn, he hideth my soul in the cleft of the rock. Well, this is where that reference comes from, of course. And so now we're turning from 33 and going into chapter 34. And there it begins. The Lord said to Moses, chisel out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and I will write on them the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. Be ready in the morning, and then come up to Mount Sinai. Present to me there on top of the mountain. No one is to come with you or be seen anywhere on the mountain. Not even the flocks and herds that may graze in front of the mountain. And so Moses chiseled out 2 stone tablets like the first ones and went up on Mount Sinai early in the morning as the Lord had commanded him. And he carried the 2 stone tablets in his hands. And then the Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, the Lord. And he passed in front of Moses proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punished the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshipped. Lord, he said, if I have found favor in your eyes, then let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, forgive our wickedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. And God does just that. Moses has intervened, God has heard and forgiven the Israelites. The covenant has been restored, the 10 Commandments will be returned, and the journey will continue. But before we get to the absolute close today, there is an important point I want to make about this. Though there is mystery here for sure, the text tells us that Moses sees God's glory represented in the back of God passing by. And there's an important point to draw from this. Even though Moses cannot know or comprehend God completely, he cannot see God fully, he can only see God's back, it's enough. And this is the beginning of the wilderness journey. God has appeared in cloud and fire on Mount Sinai. God has given instructions for the tabernacle, which will remind the people in a concrete way of God's abiding presence. And even in the face of betrayal, God has renewed God's promise to be with the Israelites on the long journey that still lies ahead. It is enough. It's more than enough. And so that's where we're going to end for today. On Saturday, I'll be back with the Saturday edition of the DaveCast, which is different from the week because we preview Sunday's worship and I interview a special guest. This week's guest is none other than our children's pastor, Shane Burns, a great guy. And so, we're going to be talking a little bit about what it's been like for him trying to do children's ministry during the pandemic. And then he's going to be telling about a very special children's ministry that he is kicking off next week. And so I think that's going to be a great interview. You get to know Shane if you don't know him a little bit better because he's just got a wonderful way about him. All right, so look forward to that. And so until then, be safe and keep bringing the hope. God bless you. Bye-bye.